Okay, last weekend, as you saw, I went to a small reenactment do at Gulliver's World near Warrington, Cheshire. Now, you might notice that I had to strap the gun up with a block of wood, this in fact, and a ratchet strap over the top of the barrel down to the trails. Now this was because when taking it out and towing it round the speed bumps here where I live, it developed some play in the gun mounting. Now what I've done to counteract that, other than putting a block of wood across while I tow it, is I have changed this point here. Remember me designing a hinge system into here so that we could still lock the traverse and then flex the elevation up and down. Well, I realised that looking at pictures of the real gun, it seems that the idea of this is it locks everything solid. It locks the traverse and the elevation at the same time. Basically that's what you put on when you're towing the gun. So I've done some modifications. You can see this is now dropped down a little bit more. I've basically welded some box section steel. Well, actually it's not box section steel. I've folded some steel to basically give it about another 20mm drop below this point here, so that I can still wind this clamp, this wing nut off, which I've got it tight, quite tight at the moment, but basically wind that wing nut off and push the locking joint up and out. But I will show you that it still works. I can just get in. Right, loosen that off. You see, as soon as I loosen that wing nut, the gun moved slightly. So basically wing nut off, and then that moves out like so. Then back in, and wing nut on. So I've also done an extension on this section here. I'm still going to do a slight modification. This point here where the metals, this metal bar here which is dropping down, I'm going to grind that off so that it's not sticking into this flat area here, and I'm going to reinforce it backwards so that it holds together better. Now the reason I've done this is, if you look at some of the pictures that I've got off the web of this next part, which is the gunner's shield, the guard which protects the gunner from the breech recoiling. On this one you can see a little bit more detail. Now you can see just about that there appears to be 3 screws, bolts, whatever, which run into which hold this shield arm on. Now what I'm doing is I've now changed it so that there's 3 M10 bolts which are set about 50mm apart. So the total length of that is around 15 centimeters, this point here. Now this would have actually looked a bit better if this part here had come closer to the breech, but the tubing I had forced me to come to this point as a limit. Now in reality it would look better if this travelled out this far. Now people have also been asking me for more measurements as I'm going with this, so let's see what I can give you. Just a quick measurement. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the distance from the shield here to the breech here. Now I'm not saying this is exactly right per the original gun, but it seems to give a reasonable look, and it's 51 centimeters to that point there. Yeah, that's 51 centimeters. Now this should, in my opinion, be longer and finish at that point there. So that should also finish about 50 or 51 centimeters. As I say, the only reason it finishes there is because I ran out of piping and I'm basically using what I have on hand. So that part there is about 15.5 centimeters. But as I say, it's just an approximate thing, and that is 7 centimeters. There to there, 7 centimeters. And the spacing's 50 millimeters. $50mm between nut centers or bolt centers. Now I'm basically planning on working out this arm now. Now the way I'm going to do it, it might not look exactly like the real one, but I'm hoping it will give a general appearance of looking correct. Here you see the real arm. You can see it travels. Let's have a little bit of a look at this. The distance there is similar to the distance there across the breech. See, that's the breech area. So basically, if we look at the breech and then double it, that should give us a bit of an idea how far down this guard arm should look. This here seems to be about 2/3 the length of one of these sections. Now, as I say, I can't do it exactly the same as the real one would look. This has partly messed up the basic plan. So if you do try making one of these, I would suggest you try and mount this further back so that it will look better. So what I'm going to basically do is I'm going to make this section here, which mounts on that plate, I'm going to make that longer. I'm going to make it about 20 centimeters in length here. Then I'm going to drop it down around about 15 millimeters or 1/2 centimeters at the top end, and I'm also going to drop this section lower here. I'm going to come down sort of about that point there. I'm going to drop downwards. Then I'm going to have the top of it running around level for around about 18 inches from that point. Now 18 inches equates to about 46 centimeters. So if I show you with a steel rule, 46 centimeters from there, so from about that point there, finishes off Where are we now? Just about there. Yeah. So that's 46 centimeters there. If I move the camera back, 46 centimeters, just about there. You can see it's roughly, that distance there is roughly equal to the length of the breech section here. Cat's come to join me. She seems to like sitting on the wheels of this gun. Anyway, now if I move the camera a bit further back so that you can have a long distance shot of this. Right, if we look at this photo here, zoom, yeah, you notice that the distance this shield runs out is approximately halfway down the length of the trails from the shield. Do you see that? So it's quite long. By the time you look at the shield here, and then you've got the breech of the gun, then you've got this guard, you're talking about half the total length of the trails. So that's what I'm trying to work on now. So basically, if we look at the trails finishing all the way down here and the shield up there, I'm looking at this thing finishing just about here. So it's quite long. Basically, I'm looking at, from the rear end of this breech, another, say, 12 inches. Travelling out another 12 inches from the rear of that breech there. So that's giving you an idea how long this thing should be. So, I've started drawing this out now on a sheet of this 3mm steel plate which I've been using. Now I'm not sure if these lines are coming out on the camera, but that's what I'm working on there, finishing off over there. Now what I'm doing is I'm also designing into it a 15mm folded edge coming out at a right angle, which will run all the way around this. And yeah, I think I might have just noticed a piece which I'm missing on the rear end, but I won't worry about that for the moment. If I was to give you a total length of this, it's actually longer than the rule I'm using. It's there's 60, so that comes out 67 centimeters is its total length, which I'm working on at the moment. So from here all the way down to there is 67 centimeters. So I'm going to cut this out and show you the basic shape which I'm creating. You can see at this point here it's fairly deep. It's around 9 centimeters deep at that point, 7 centimeters at that point, and all the way over at that end it narrows down to around 5 centimeters. Okay, I've cut this sheet of steel out, and now I'm starting to fold the 15mm edges, which are being bent over at a right angle. Now obviously when it comes to a very long edge like this, it becomes more of a problem than the shorter parts like that. So what I'm having to do, because I've not got any fancy folding equipment, remember, it's all basic tools, a big chunky vise and a range of different weight of hammers. Yeah, so what I'm doing is I'm putting the section that I'm trying to fold slightly in the vise at a time, and I've one piece at a time, and I've put some angle iron in the jaws to widen them. And what I'm doing is I'm thumping a section of it slightly there, then I'm moving the metal on further into the jaws of the vise, and I'm doing another section of it very slightly, then I'm moving it backwards and forwards, repeatedly doing the same. I'm moving the fold slightly further over all the time. Now if you, for instance, fold this section all the way down flat and then continue working down the metal all in one go, what you'll end up doing is putting a big curve in the steel, because you're stretching the edge by doing that. Now there is another option. If you have a welder, obviously, you can cut this side into a series of smaller sections, then fold each of those small sections and then weld it back up again. That works quite well as well. And if this doesn't work out as well as I'm hoping here, I may well employ that system. But for now I'm going to carry on and see how it works out. If it does, for instance, put a bend in the metal working the way I am, what I can do is I can put some cuts in it again and then try and straighten it back and then weld it up. So either way I can still hopefully recover the shape. If this doesn't end up being rigid enough, you can see now that while the metal is quite flat, I can flex this quite easily. But once these edges are bent over, top and bottom, it should become a lot more rigid. So we'll see how things go. If it's not rigid enough, as I was going to say, we can always weld some angle iron behind this, or a piece of box section steel. And after quite a few hours work, I end up with this arrangement. See, I've cut a nice long slot in there at the front, or at the rear end I should say, about 5 to 6 inches long. Then I've left a small space and then put a large circle in, large hole, round hole cut in it, and then another space about 6 inches, and I've put another hole. They're about 35mm in diameter, these holes, and that slot's about 35 in width. So that gives me that. So there's the real one, and that's what I've done. It's a little bit longer, I would think, than the real one, but that's due to a few proportions which are slightly out on my gun. Sorry, that's the music playing in my Jeep. I thought I'd give the radio a bit of a test. Yeah, so it's looking quite good. Now I'm gonna have to go and buy some, I would think, 10mm diameter steel round bar, and that's gonna have to be fixed there, then bent round in a loop going upwards. I would think about, what would that say? It's probably about 7 or 8 inches high, I would think, up here, and then bend it round in a curve. Then it comes about 12 inches this direction, round again, and then bends round and joins back up at this point here. Now you can see how the real one's done. Looking at this picture, it seems to have some sort of a post arrangement, so there's a bolt running into the metal, and then the round bar which comes down seems to have like a piece of pipe welded on the bottom which the bolt runs through. So basically, to do that sort of setup, it's just 2 holes drilled in here, probably about M8s, 8mm holes. So that will be the job to be done next. Okay, once it's finished, it should look something like this. I've made this a little bit shorter than how it should be. It's not particularly brilliant, but I think it's going to do for me. Basically, this is just relatively thin steel plate. It's actually galvanized steel plate, and it's folded round over the edges, and it's just tack welded in several places, 1, 2, 3, 4 across the top, 2 down each side on the short pieces, 2 tacks just to hold it to the 13mm round bar that I've used. Basically, I've made it this size because I didn't have much of this bar, but I can always make this again later on and make it look better. So as you can see, it's bolted on with the 3 bolts there, and I've cut some slots in. That's about 6 inches long, that slot, and then these are about 30mm holes. So that gives you the idea. So if I step back with it, it gives it that general look to it. You can see the breech hole in the back of the box doesn't look too bad here from this distance. I've painted the edge silver and the centre black so that it looks like there is a hole there, you know. I may remake the top lid which I've made for it at some point, and I might even shape the breech so that it curves round, sweeps round across on that side there. But there are jobs to be done. Okay, I hope that helps.